What would I do if I had to start over? What's up, Brew Crew? Welcome back to Beer City Board Games. Now, I was recently tagged in a video from my friends over at Blackboard Gaming. Dwayne and Alicia did a video where they discussed the games that they would buy if they had to rebuild their collection from scratch with only $150 to work with. And they tagged a few other creators at the end to give their lists. So this was a tough topic for a couple of reasons. I've said before, I'm not super precious about my game collection because at the end of the day, they're just things and not nearly as important to me as the people that I play them with. Still though, losing my entire collection would definitely be tough, and the idea of having to start over again is pretty daunting. But another reason this was tough is because several of my favorite games have recently been reprinted with fancy new or deluxe versions. Games like Castles of Burgundy, La Granja, and Glenmore. So I could get the deluxe Castles of Burgundy and maybe one other game, but that's about it. And I wanted to try and get at least a decent amount of games for that amount of money. At least enough games to cover a few different types of situations, depending on if I'm looking for something light or heavy, and if I'm playing with new or experienced gamers. So with that in mind, I went online shopping. I priced all of these games out at either Game Nerds or Miniature Market for the sake of convenience, and also because that's likely closer to what the regular price of these games would be. If I were to actually start my collection over, most of these games would probably be purchased from my FLGS because as a member there, I get a pretty solid loyalty discount at this point. I'll probably also be working the virtual flea markets on Board Game Geek, looking for deals on there as well. But, like I said, for the sake of convenience and consistency, I decided to stick with the online retailers. Okay, let's get started. First up is a little card game that I actually just had the opportunity to play at Origins last week, and that's Xylotar from Bezier Games. This game really surprised me. Honestly, I don't like the name, I don't like the cover, but the game is so good. This is a trick-taking game, but instead of playing the cards you're dealt, you're going to sort the cards dealt to you in order from lowest to highest, and then pass the cards face down to the person on your left. They're going to spread them out, but keep them face down in the same order. So you know where your highest card and lowest card are, and what color they are, but you don't know the exact numbers. So you're trying to play a trick-taking game with imperfect information. It sounds like it shouldn't work, but wow, does it work. On top of that, this is also a game where you're trying to bid the number of tricks that you'll win, but you'll be doing that somewhat blindly as well. On your turn, after you've played a card to the trick, you can make a bid by looking at two adjacent cards in the row in front of you, choosing one to place face up. The number on that card is the number of tricks you want to win for bonus points. And I love the fact that they went with bonus points here. You're not penalized if you don't make your bid, but you'll get extra points if you do, which is great since you don't have complete control over the amount that you're bidding. As you play through, you'll start to get a feel for what cards you have based on what you've turned over so far, so you can kind of make an educated guess as to what cards might be best for you to bid with. We really like trick-taking games and card games in general, and since this is a pretty recent game, I feel like there's still a lot of potential for discovery here. Next up, I wanted to make sure that I'm hitting the other end of the spectrum too, with a nice crunchy game that'll give me that mid to mid-heavy Euro feeling that I love. And so my next pick would be Darwin's Journey from Thundergriff Games. This game is available at online retailers right now for about $48, which honestly feels like a pretty good value for the amount of the game that you're going to get in the box. In this game, you are following the journey of Charles Darwin and the HMS Beagle as he catalogs his discoveries across the Galapagos Islands. This is a worker placement game at its heart, but It has a very cool worker leveling mechanism. Your workers begin the game pretty weak, only being able to do very basic actions. But as you take actions to educate your workers, you'll place these little seals next to them, which means that those workers can now be sent to better spaces and do more powerful actions. This game really hits right in my wheelhouse as far as weight and complexity goes. Plus, I think this is a good game to start out my collection with because there's a pretty solid amount of variability at setup between the tiles that get placed and where, as well as which crew cards you draw at the beginning of the game. I've already played this one quite a bit, and I've actually done a review for it, which I'll link in the description. And it's one that I don't see myself tiring of playing anytime soon. That's Darwin's Journey. All right, I wanted another smaller game that's easy to get to the table in social situations, since those tend to be some of my most memorable plays. And there are a lot of games that I considered for this, but I decided to go with a classic, and that's Can't Stop. This is a game that is so simple to play. We'll often play it back to back to back. Now, we have the new Eagle Griffin version, which uses a neoprene mat and little wooden markers, but we've replaced the wooden markers with little plastic cones that we bought from Game Crafters, which we got in a bunch of custom colors. If you've never played Can't Stop before, basically you're rolling 4 dice and making 2 sets of 2 dice and moving your cones up on that number track. The trick is that you only get 3 of those cones, so you can only choose 3 numbers, and if you ever roll and can't move up on one of those numbers, you bust, and your turn ends immediately. So it's simple, fun, and we really love trying to goad each other into risking another roll. I'd highly recommend checking out this old school push your luck game if you haven't tried it yet. It looks like at the time of this recording, the Eagle Griffin version of this game is about 18 bucks online, so a pretty inexpensive game that we will get a lot of mileage out of. That's Can't Stop. Okay, next, I knew I wanted to have a good co-op game. Jen and I really fell in love with gaming playing co-ops like Pandemic and Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. So I decided to grab a mashup of the two and picked Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. I actually haven't tried a lot of the new Pandemic variants like Star Wars The Clone Wars or the World of Warcraft Wrath of the Lich King. And I've heard they're quite good as well. But what I really like about Reign of Cthulhu is that the game can change up quite a bit, not just based on the roles selected like in base Pandemic, but also depending on the order in which the great old ones are revealed. I also like the addition of the Shoggoths to add a little bit of additional difficulty to the game. I would even go so far as to say that this is my favorite of the Pandemic games that I've played so far, although I do think Pandemic Iberia is quite good as well. I think the only reason we haven't played some of the newer versions is because we got a little pandemicked out after playing so much of it early on. But the mechanism still holds up, and I still find myself comparing a lot of new co-ops to Pandemic. It's kind of become the standard by which I measure other co-ops. But I would very much like to try Wrath of the Lich King and Star Wars The Clone Wars, just to see how they change up the game. Now, this one is currently listed online for approximately $40, so we're getting pretty close to our limit, but I've got room for one more, I think. All right, my final game on this list is another one that I think gets you a lot of game for the money, and that's Res Arcana. I've said it before, but this game took me a little bit to warm up to, but each time I play it, I find something new to love about it. And that sense of discovery is part of why I wanted to put it on this list. But on top of that, it's also just a really clever engine-building card game. You start off with a very small deck of cards, and those are all of the cards that you'll get for the whole game. And at the beginning of the game, it feels like you'll never be able to do anything really significant. But as the game goes on, you start playing down more and more cards. Eventually, you're making really great combos and generating a ton of resources which you can use to play even more cards, or claim monuments or places of power which will score you points. And the game end is triggered at 10 points, so it's over fairly quickly. But in that short amount of time, you have a lot of interesting decisions to make. You'll be playing these cards out, trying to find an efficient combination to be able to get to those 10 points as quickly as possible. You're also going to have a character ability that you can use, and each round you're going to select a tile that will give you a bonus for that round. So many fun decisions in a game that is currently selling for about $31 online, and one that, again, I could see myself playing pretty frequently because so much of your game and strategy is dependent on the cards that you've drafted. I could see this being a really fun game to try to really master, and that's Res Arcana. All right, those are the games that I would choose to restart my collection if I only had $150 to spend. So, to recap, I had Xylotar at $11, Darwin's Journey at $48, Can't Stop at $18, Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu at $40, and Res Arcana at $31, which brings my total to $148. And again, I feel like I got a solid range of gameplay options here. So I think I'd be happy at least starting off with these games. This was a tough list to make, but it was also a really fun thought exercise, so thanks again to Blackboard Gaming for tagging me, and I'm going to put a link to their video in the description below. You should definitely go check that out as well. Now, let me know, if you had to start over from scratch with only $150 for your board game budget, what games would you buy and why? And until next time, let's get another round for the table.